The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, a perfect backdrop to what felt like a perfect evening. As I set the table for dinner, the familiar scents of garlic and rosemary wafted from the kitchen, mixing with the sounds of soft music playing in the background. It was our routine, one I cherished deeply. Every Sunday, without fail, I prepared a special meal for Anna and me. I wanted this evening to be different, to be memorable, as I planned to surprise her with a new recipe I discovered just that week. Anna stepped into the dining room, her smile lighting up the space more than the flickering candle flames could. She wore that soft blue dress that hugged her figure perfectly, the one that always made my heart race. "Wow, it looks amazing in here," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with delight. I couldn't help but smile back, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for her presence in my life. "Just wait until you taste it," I replied, pride swelling in my chest. As she took her seat, I poured us both a glass of red wine, its deep crimson color promising warmth and richness. We clinked our glasses together, and I felt the familiar rush of happiness that always accompanied these moments. Just the two of us, together in our little world. The first bite of the meal was a triumph. "This is incredible, Ben. You had to teach me how to make this," Anna exclaimed, her enthusiasm contagious. I watched her relish each mouthful, her eyes closing in bliss, and felt an incredible sense of satisfaction. I had always loved cooking, but cooking for Anna made it all the more special. Each meal was a love letter, each ingredient carefully chosen to reflect my affection for her. As the evening unfolded, we delved into light-hearted banter, teasing each other about silly things from our week. "Remember when you tried to fix the leaky sink and ended up flooding the kitchen?" She laughed, her laughter ringing like music. I couldn't help but join in, recalling the ridiculousness of that moment. "Hey, I thought I was being handy. You should have seen my Pinterest board of DIY plumbing fixes," I retorted, and we both burst into laughter, our voices echoing in the cozy confines of our home. With each shared joke and every teasing glance, the connection between us deepened. It was these moments that reassured me of our love. I felt as if we were in a bubble, insulated from the outside world. The thought of our future together filled me with hope. We talked about our plans for the summer, weekend getaways to the beach, hiking trips in the mountains, and maybe even finally getting that puppy we had always talked about. Just imagine, Ben, a little golden retriever running around, chewing on everything in sight. Anna exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with the thought. I could picture it vividly, the chaos and joy it would bring. As dinner drew to a close, I brought out dessert, a rich chocolate cake that I had spent hours perfecting. "You spoil me," Anna teased, but I could see the appreciation in her eyes as she savored each forkful. We lingered at the table, sharing stories from our past, our dreams, and the simple joys of our lives together. "Sometimes I can't believe how lucky we are," I said, looking at her with a warmth that filled my heart. "I mean, look at us. We've built this amazing life together." Anna nodded, her expression sincere. "I feel the same way, Ben. I couldn't imagine doing this with anyone else." That sentiment resonated deeply within me, and for a moment, I felt invincible. Our love felt unwavering, a sturdy foundation upon which we had built our lives. I couldn't foresee any storm that could shake us. Little did I know that beneath the surface of this idyllic life, shadows were quietly gathering, threatening to unravel everything I held dear. As we cleared the table together, our fingers brushed against each other, igniting a spark that made my heart race. The mundane act of washing dishes became a dance, a rhythm that reflected our bond. I stole glances at Anna, marveling at how effortlessly she moved through life. How she filled our home with laughter and love. I felt an overwhelming need to cherish every moment, to hold on to this happiness with both hands. Later, as we settled onto the couch with a blanket draped over us, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wrapped my arm around Anna, pulling her closer, feeling her warmth against me. We watched a movie, but I was only half aware of the plot, my thoughts drifting between the scenes on the screen and the woman beside me. I could hear her soft breathing, her content sighs, and I was acutely aware of how fortunate I was. "Whatever happens, I'll always be here for you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Anna looked up, her eyes searching mine. "I know, Ben, and I'm so grateful for that." Those words lingered in the air, heavy with promise. At that moment, I believed with all my heart that we would navigate through anything life threw our way. The evening faded into a comfortable silence, and I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of love enveloping me. Yet, as I sat there, a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in the back of my mind, a whisper of uncertainty that I pushed aside, determined to focus on the happiness of the moment. Little did I know, the shadows lurking in the corners of my life were waiting for the right moment to strike, ready to shatter the illusion of our perfect world. As the days turned into weeks, the warm glow of that perfect evening began to fade, replaced by an unsettling sense of unease. I couldn't quite pinpoint when it all began, but something had shifted in Anna. The little things I once found charming began to raise red flags in my mind. It was subtle at first, a momentary glance away, a fleeting smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed that she started coming home later from work, her excuses seemingly valid yet increasingly vague. We had a late meeting, she'd say, her tone casual, but I could sense an undercurrent of something unspoken. My initial reaction was to dismiss it. After all, we all had busy days. And I trusted her. But with each passing week, the weight of her unexplained absences began to gnaw at me. One evening, I decided to cook dinner for us. I had a special recipe in mind, something I thought would remind her of our early days together. The kitchen was filled with the comforting aromas of sautéed vegetables and roasting chicken. I set the table, hoping to surprise her, and waited expectantly. As the clock ticked closer to 7, I felt a pang of disappointment. Anna was usually home by then. I texted her, but she didn't reply. When she finally walked through the door, the smile on her face seemed forced. "Hey, I'm so sorry. The meeting ran late," she explained, but I couldn't help but notice the slight flush on her cheeks and the way her hair was hastily thrown into a bun as if she had rushed to make it home. I greeted her with a smile, but the warm welcome I had planned felt stilted now. Over dinner, I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her day. But instead of the usual lively exchange, she answered my questions with short, distracted replies. She seemed distant, lost in her thoughts. It was as if a barrier had risen between us. I watched her gaze drift to the window as if she were searching for something, or someone, outside. The unease inside me deepened. "Is everything okay?" I asked tentatively, probing gently. She looked at me, momentarily caught off guard, before shaking her head. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my stomach twisted tighter. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, an instinct whispering that something was amiss. Days turned into a blur of suspicion. I found myself watching Anna more closely, scrutinizing her actions, her phone, and the way she reacted to messages. One afternoon, I noticed her phone light up with a text while she was in the shower. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. A message from a number I didn't recognize read, "Can't wait to see you tonight." My heart raced as confusion and anger washed over me. I quickly put the phone down, scolding myself for even considering crossing that line. I didn't want to be that person, jealous and paranoid. But the thought lingered, taunting me. Then came the day that shattered the delicate threads of trust I was trying to hold on to. I had taken the day off work, planning to surprise Anna with lunch. I figured it was a good way to reconnect, to remind her that we were a team, no matter how busy life got. I arrived at her office, excited to see her. As I parked and walked toward the entrance, a strange feeling washed over me. I stepped into the bustling office, scanning the room for her familiar face. But my heart dropped when I caught sight of her through the large glass window. There she was, standing close to our neighbor, Mark, who lived just a few doors down. They were laughing, a sound that had once been music to my ears, now twisted into a painful reminder of my growing fears. They seemed so at ease with each other, their bodies angled in toward one another as if sharing a secret only they were privy to. I watched, frozen, my breath catching in my throat, as Mark leaned in to whisper something in her ear. She threw her head back in laughter, and in that moment, I felt my world tilt on its axis. It was a gut-wrenching realization, the kind that shatters illusions and leaves you reeling. My mind raced as I processed what I was witnessing. They weren't just friends, there was an intimacy in their interaction that sent a surge of betrayal coursing through me. I felt as though I had been punched in the gut, the air escaping my lungs. The woman I loved, who I had trusted with everything, was in the arms of another man. As I stood there, watching them, I felt an overwhelming wave of emotions crashing over me, anger, confusion, and aching sadness that threatened to pull me under. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but a part of me held back. Instead, I chose to step away, retreating to the safety of my car. The last thing I wanted was to make a scene, to give them the satisfaction of knowing I had been hurt. Once inside the car, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white. I felt lost, and betrayed by the very person who I had thought was my partner in life. The visions of our future together crumbled in front of me like a house of cards. I replayed the laughter I had heard, the warmth I had felt just days before, and wondered if any of it had ever been real. That night, I lay in bed beside Anna, the familiar warmth of her presence now feeling like an insurmountable distance. I stared at the ceiling, lost in thoughts that spiraled into a whirlwind of questions. How could I confront her? What if I was wrong? I couldn't bear the thought of being that guy, the one who jumps to conclusions without proof. But as I lay there, the reality settled heavily in my chest. I knew something was wrong, the evidence was there, hidden in plain sight. I felt trapped, teetering on the edge of a decision that would change everything. At that moment, I understood that my life, my love, was not the sanctuary I believed it to be. The facade was cracking, and I could no longer ignore the growing shadows that loomed over us. The days that followed my discovery were a blur of emotions, each moment tinged with the sting of betrayal. I felt like I was walking through a fog, my mind clouded with thoughts of Anna and Mark, their laughter echoing in my ears like a haunting melody. Instead of confronting her, I opted for silence, wrestling with the whirlwind of anger and confusion inside me. My heart was in turmoil, but deep down, I knew that I couldn't just let this slide. As I sat on our patio one evening, staring out into the twilight, the weight of my decision pressed heavily upon me. I could have confronted Anna, I could have screamed and shouted and thrown everything into disarray. But as the images of them together flashed through my mind, I realized that I wanted something more than just a confrontation. I wanted to make her feel the pain she had caused me. I wanted my revenge to be calculated, cunning, and poetic in its execution. I needed time to think, to plot. The idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind, each thought weaving a darker tapestry. What if I could turn the tables on her? What if I could strip away the life she had built with me, leaving her vulnerable and alone? The thrill of the thought sent a shiver down my spine. With a newfound determination, I began to hatch my plan. Selling our home became the centerpiece of my scheme. Our house had always been a symbol of our life together, the laughter, the love, the dreams we had shared. It was where we had envisioned our future. But now, it represented something else entirely, a trap, a facade hiding the truth of her betrayal. I could sell it and leave her with nothing, all while ensuring that the new owner was none other than Mark. The more I thought about it, the more I relished the idea. This was not just revenge, it was poetic justice. I would not only reclaim my sense of power but also sever the ties binding Anna to her secret. She would wake up one day and find her life turned upside down, her world shattered by the very decisions she had made. I spent sleepless nights sketching out the details in my mind, running through various scenarios and their potential consequences. I had to make sure everything was perfect. I needed to sell the house without raising any suspicion. I couldn't allow Anna to catch wind of my intentions. The more I contemplated my plan, the more it excited me. I felt like a puppeteer, ready to cut the strings that held her up. Then came the next crucial step. I needed to talk to Mark. Although we had never been particularly close, I thought it might be worth reaching out to him. I knew how much he coveted our house. After all, it was one of the best in the neighborhood. It had charm, space, and a beautiful yard where we had hosted countless barbecues and gatherings with friends. I envisioned him taking over our life, moving into a home filled with memories that had been tainted by his infidelity. I decided to invite him over under the guise of casual conversation. Pretending it was just a friendly chat between neighbors, I called him up and suggested we meet for coffee at a nearby cafe. "Hey, Mark, I was wondering if you'd like to grab a cup of coffee tomorrow. There's something I'd like to discuss." "Sure, sounds good. What's on your mind?" he replied, his voice easy and relaxed, completely oblivious to my underlying motives. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I hung up the phone, envisioning the upcoming meeting. This was the moment I had been waiting for, my chance to set my plan in motion. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my heart racing with anticipation. I chose a secluded table in the back corner, a strategic spot where I could control the conversation without any distractions. I ordered a strong black coffee, allowing the bitter taste to ground me as I waited for Mark to arrive. When he finally walked in, he wore that same charming smile I had seen so many times before. The sight of him made my blood boil, but I kept my composure, greeting him with a friendly nod. "Hey, Mark, thanks for coming," I said, gesturing for him to sit. As we exchanged small talk, I tried to gauge his demeanor, noting the easy confidence with which he carried himself. It infuriated me to think that he was so comfortable, especially in light of the knowledge I now possessed. I steered the conversation toward our neighborhood, commenting on how some homes were going up for sale. "You know, I've been thinking about selling our place," I mentioned casually, watching for any sign of his reaction. Mark's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? I've always thought your house was one of the best in the area. What's making you want to sell?" I shrugged nonchalantly, hiding my true intentions. "Just a change of pace, I guess. It feels like it's time to move on." I could see the gears turning in his mind, the excitement brewing as he contemplated the prospect of purchasing my house. "I'd love to see what you're thinking. If you do decide to sell, let me know. I'd be very interested," he said, his enthusiasm evident. Inside, I felt a wicked sense of pleasure. I could picture it now, Anna returning home one day to find not just a new owner, but her lover as the new proprietor of our lives together. The thought of her shock and despair fueled my resolve. As we continued our conversation, I carefully planted seeds of doubt about Anna, allowing Mark's curiosity to grow. I mentioned her long hours at work, the vague excuses, and how she seemed a bit distant lately. I made it sound like a passing comment, but I could see the way he reacted, intrigued yet cautious. "Yeah, relationships can be tricky," he said, his tone shifting ever so slightly. "I've seen it happen before." As we parted ways, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. The plan was taking shape, and I was now one step closer to executing my revenge. The thrill of it sent a shiver down my spine. I was no longer just the betrayed husband, I was the orchestrator of my fate, ready to reclaim the control I had lost. With each passing day, I plotted and planned, taking every step carefully. I knew I had to remain vigilant and ensure that Anna remained oblivious to my intentions. The house sale would be the perfect cover, a way to hurt her without her realizing the true extent of my vengeance until it was too late. And as I lay in bed each night, I could already envision the moment when I would reveal the truth to her. The thought electrified me, and I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't experienced in a long time. In my mind, I was already winning this game, and I wouldn't stop until I had brought her world crashing down around her. The days passed in a blur as I meticulously orchestrated the sale of our house. I was both exhilarated and anxious, driven by the anticipation of my revenge. I had found a real estate agent who was eager to list our home at a competitive price, and Mark was keenly interested, ready to pounce as soon as I indicated that the house was officially on the market. I put on my best mask of normalcy around Anna, maintaining the facade of a supportive partner, even as I plotted her downfall in secret. It was almost exhilarating to play the role of the loving husband while knowing that I was about to rip away the very foundation of her life. The day of the signing arrived with an air of finality. The agent had arranged a quick turnaround on the paperwork, a smooth process that would ensure I could sell the house swiftly without raising any suspicions. As I sat in the small conference room at the real estate office, surrounded by the crisp scent of new contracts and the hum of a busy day, I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. "Everything is in order, Ben," the agent said, glancing at me with a reassuring smile. "Once you sign here, the house will officially be sold. We'll move quickly to get everything finalized." I nodded, my heart racing beneath the surface. I had gone over the documents multiple times, ensuring that everything was correct, all while feigning interest in the details. I had to keep my head clear to maintain the illusion of a smooth transaction. Each signature felt like a nail being driven into the coffin of our shared life. I signed my name confidently, the pen gliding smoothly over the paper as if I were signing away my shackles. "So, this is it then?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside me. "Yes, just a few more signatures, and it'll all be wrapped up," the agent replied, oblivious to the inner conflict I was grappling with. I finished signing and handed the papers back to her, feeling a sense of finality settle over me. After what felt like hours, the transaction was complete. The agent congratulated me, and I forced a smile, masking the chaos that churned within. I felt the weight of the moment crash over me. This was it. I was severing the last ties that bound me to Anna. I could already envision her face when she found out the truth, the shock and disbelief etched into her features. The thought sent a thrill down my spine. With the signing done, I hurried home, knowing that I had to act quickly to hide my true intentions. I needed to erase any traces of what I had done before Anna returned. I had already started packing away some of my personal belongings, but now it was time to take it to the next level. As I entered our home, the familiar scent of our life together engulfed me, faint notes of lavender and the remnants of dinner still lingered in the air. But instead of warmth, I felt a chill, the reality of what I had done settling over me like a heavy shroud. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a battleground, a place where memories had been tainted by betrayal. I set to work immediately, moving through the rooms with a newfound urgency. I had to remove any evidence that could tie me to this betrayal. I started in the living room, carefully packing away photographs that featured Anna and me together. I felt a pang of guilt as I removed the images from their frames, each one a testament to a love that now felt like a distant memory. I moved on to the bookshelf, where a collection of memories and shared interests sat proudly. I pulled out books that I knew held our shared stories, those titles that had sparked our late-night discussions and debates. I tossed them into a box, focusing on the task at hand, and pushing aside the emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Next, I went to the kitchen, the heart of our home, where I had spent countless hours cooking for Anna. The pots and pans, the utensils, all reminders of meals prepared with love and care. Had to go. I quickly gathered them, stashing them away as though I were burying a part of myself alive. Each clatter of the dishes against the box felt like a reminder of what I was about to destroy. Once I had cleared the more obvious evidence, I turned my attention to the hidden corners of our home, those places where memories lingered in the shadows. I opened the drawer of my nightstand, pulling out love notes Anna had left for me over the years. Words that had once brought me comfort now felt like daggers. I tucked them away, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness, the remnants of a relationship that would soon be nothing more than a memory. As I worked, I felt an odd sense of confidence grow within me. This was my moment. I was taking control of my narrative. I was no longer just the victim of betrayal. I was the architect of my destiny, wielding my revenge like a weapon. With the packing complete, I took a moment to survey the chaos I had created. The house felt empty, stripped of the life we had built together. I imagined Anna walking in and realizing that everything was different, that the life she thought she had was slipping away before her eyes. The anticipation of that moment filled me with a dark exhilaration. I cleaned up the remaining evidence, discarding old receipts and documents that might reveal my hand. I needed to ensure that nothing would lead her back to the truth, nothing that could unearth my carefully laid plans. As I took a moment to breathe, leaning against the kitchen counter, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Everything was falling into place. I had turned the tables, and I was finally reclaiming the power I had lost. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, and I knew I was close to achieving the satisfaction I craved. With the last remnants of our life packed away and the house ready for its new owner, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I was ready to move on, ready to watch as the pieces of Anna's world came tumbling down around her. I couldn't wait for the moment when she would realize what I had done. It was only a matter of time before my revenge would unfold, and with it, a new chapter of my life would begin, one where I would no longer be the one left behind. The morning sun broke through the curtains, casting warm rays across the room, yet I felt a chill settle in my bones. Today was the day I had orchestrated. My masterpiece of revenge was about to unfold, and I could hardly contain my excitement. As I prepared for the day ahead, I replayed the events of the previous day in my mind. Savoring each detail, I could almost hear the echoes of my signatures on the papers that had sealed Anna's fate. Anna had been away on a business trip, and the silence of the house had been oddly comforting. I had relished the quiet moments, reveling in the knowledge that I was about to turn her life upside down. I imagined her landing at the airport, blissfully unaware of the storm that awaited her. She would be returning to a home that was no longer hers, a place that had transformed overnight into a mere shell of what it once was. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Anna, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, Ben, I just landed. Can you believe it? I can't wait to get home and relax after this trip." "Yeah, I'm glad you're back," I replied, forcing a nonchalant tone. Inside, I was brimming with anticipation. "Just take a cab home, I'll be around." After hanging up, I took a moment to steady my breathing. My heart raced as I imagined her walking through the front door, her unsuspecting smile fading as reality dawned on her. I decided to observe her reaction from a distance, positioning myself in the nearby park where I could watch the house without being seen. As the minutes passed, my mind raced with visions of her returning home. What would she say? How would she react? I felt a surge of adrenaline at the thought of the moment when her world would come crashing down. I grabbed my coffee from a nearby cafe, taking a deep sip, the bitterness mirroring the satisfaction I felt brewing within me. Finally, I spotted the familiar yellow taxi pull up in front of our house. Anna emerged, her luggage in tow, and I could see her excitement radiating even from a distance. She glanced at the house, a warm smile on her face, completely unaware of the chaos that had unraveled in her absence. As she walked towards the door, I leaned back against a tree, the shadows concealing me as I observed. The first thing she did was unlock the door and step inside. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. I held my breath, anticipation hanging thick in the air. What would it take for her to realize what had happened? Seconds felt like hours as I waited, imagining the look of disbelief that would soon replace her cheerful demeanor. It wasn't long before I caught a glimpse of her through the window. She dropped her bag, her face lighting up with joy as she took in the familiar surroundings. But that joy was short-lived. I could see her expression shift, confusion washing over her as she began to explore the house. She moved from room to room, her brow furrowing with each step, searching for something that was clearly out of place. I felt a thrill run through me, the anticipation building as she turned her head, looking for signs of me, perhaps wondering where I was. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw her pull out her phone, scrolling through something with urgency. My heart raced as I realized she must have sensed that something was amiss. Then, without warning, she froze, her eyes widening as the color drained from her face. It was at that moment I knew she had discovered the truth. I watched, barely able to contain my glee. As she stood there, rooted to the spot, the weight of the revelation crashing down upon her. She clutched her phone as if it were a lifeline, disbelief flickering across her features. After a few agonizing moments of silence, I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind as she processed the information. I imagined her scrolling back through her messages, perhaps looking for a sign, a clue that had been overlooked. But there was nothing, no trace of my cunning plan, only her crumbling world. I could see her pacing, her breaths quickening, and then she turned towards the window, glancing out with desperation, as if searching for answers in the familiar neighborhood. And there it was, the ultimate irony. The new owner of our home was none other than Mark, her secret lover, and the realization was etched across her face like a dark cloud descending. Her expression morphed from confusion to shock, and finally to horror. I leaned back, a satisfied grin spreading across my face as I watched the realization hit her like a tidal wave. Anna staggered backward, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. I could almost feel the shattering of her dreams, the life she had imagined crumbling to dust. At that moment, I felt a surge of triumph wash over me. This was the culmination of my carefully laid plans, the revenge I had yearned for. I savored the bittersweet taste of victory, knowing that the anguish she felt was a direct result of her own choices. She had betrayed me, and now, the tables had turned. As Anna sank to the couch, her body shaking with silent sobs, I knew I had won. She was alone now, left to grapple with the fallout of her actions. The satisfaction of witnessing her unraveling brought me a sense of peace, a calm that I hadn't felt in what seemed like ages. I was free, liberated from the shackles of betrayal, while she was left with the consequences of her choices. From my hidden vantage point, I continued to watch as Anna struggled to comprehend the reality before her. The shock of betrayal was palpable, and I relished every moment of her realization. The pain she felt was no longer my burden to carry. I had released myself from the ties that bound us, and now, she would bear the weight of her decisions alone. As I slowly walked away from the scene, I felt lighter, my heart unburdened by the shadows of my past. Revenge had been served, and with it, I was ready to embrace the new life that awaited me, unencumbered by the remnants of a love that had turned to ashes. Anna called just minutes after the realization must have hit her. Her call was almost inevitable, like a reflex she couldn't control. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and glanced at the screen, watching her name flash in bold letters. For a brief moment, I considered ignoring it, letting her stew in confusion and fear for a little while longer. But I couldn't resist. I wanted to hear her voice, wanted to feel the weight of her shock through the phone. I swiped to answer, bringing the phone to my ear with a practiced calm. "Hello," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the satisfaction I felt simmering beneath the surface. "Ben?" Her voice trembled, a mixture of confusion and desperation. She was shaken, but still holding on to some small hope that this was all just a misunderstanding. "What's going on? I just got home, and there's something wrong with the house. The locks, my key doesn't work, and Mark says the house isn't ours anymore?" Her words spilled out in a frantic jumble, the panic in her voice growing with every sentence. I could picture her perfectly, pacing around the house, clutching her phone, trying to make sense of it all. For a moment, I let the silence hang between us, letting her uncertainty deepen. "Yeah," I finally replied, my tone cold but clear. "That's right. The house isn't ours anymore." There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear her breath hitch. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice smaller now, like she already knew the answer but needed to hear it from me. "Ben, what the hell is going on?" I smiled to myself, savoring the moment. "I sold the house, Anna," I said, the words leaving my mouth with a kind of finality. "It's not ours anymore. It belongs to Mark now." Her gasp was audible, sharp, and filled with disbelief. What? Did you sell the house? To Mark?" She was struggling to process it, her mind clearly racing to piece together the truth. "That's right," I continued, not bothering to sugarcoat anything. "You think I didn't know? That I hadn't noticed you sneaking around with him? I've known for a while, Anna, and I decided to do something about it." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear her breathing, shallow and erratic, as the full weight of my words sank in. "Ben, I didn't." "Save it," I cut her off, my voice sharper now. "Don't bother lying. I've watched you with him. I've seen it. So, I made sure you both got what you deserved." Her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke again. How could you do this?" I chuckled, the sound low and dark. How could you, Anna? You betrayed me. You lied to me, for years. So, I decided to take something back. I sold the house, and I'm taking the money with me." "Did you want Mark so badly? Well, now the two of you can figure out how to live with what's left." There was a long pause, and for a second, I almost wondered if she'd hung up. But then I heard a small, broken sound, half sob, half breath, escape her. "Ben, please, we can talk about this. We can fix it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far." I interrupted her again, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "No, Anna. It's too late. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. I'm done." With that, I ended the call. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand, feeling the finality of it all settle in. The silence in the air was thicker now, but this time, it felt liberating. I had said everything I needed to say. The chapter was closed. For Mark, the situation played out perfectly. The affair with Anna had never been about love or a deep connection. It was just a thrill, a distraction from his own life. What he truly wanted was the house, the one he had been eyeing for years. When Ben offered it to him, it felt like a golden opportunity wrapped in the guise of romance. Anna had been a convenient amusement, but nothing more. Now, with the house legally his, he saw no reason to continue their fling. When Anna came to him, her face pale and her voice trembling, pleading for help, Mark was cold and detached. He had no intention of rescuing her from the mess she was in. "It was fun while it lasted, Anna," he said with a shrug, barely masking his indifference. "But this was never about us. And now, I've got what I wanted." He didn't feel the need to offer her any comfort. To him, the game was over, and there was nothing left to say. Anna stood there in stunned silence, realizing the depth of her miscalculation. Mark had never cared for her, never seen her as more than a temporary escape. As she watched him turn his back on her, it became painfully clear that she was alone, betrayed not only by Ben's revenge but by the man she thought cared for her. As I packed the last of my things into the car, the quietness of the early morning hung in the air like a final goodbye. The sun hadn't yet risen, and the city still slumbered, unaware of the drama that had unfolded just hours before. I stood for a moment, staring at the house one last time, our house. No, my house, the one I had carefully sold right out from under Anna's feet. It was strange to think about all the memories we had built here, all the plans we once made. Now, it felt like a hollow shell, a place that had ceased to mean anything to me the moment I realized her betrayal. The house was just bricks and wood, but the weight of what had happened inside it was gone now. I felt lighter. I slipped into the driver's seat, the leather cool beneath me, and glanced at the duffel bag in the passenger seat, inside it. The cash from the sale of the house. I had drained the joint accounts, too, leaving Anna with absolutely nothing. It felt fitting, like the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. She had taken everything from me emotionally, little by little, with every secret, every lie. So, in return, I took everything material. There was a certain poetic justice to it all. The money didn't matter as much as the principle. This was about balance, about taking back the power that she thought she could steal from me. Now, I was the one in control. I started the engine and pulled away from the house slowly, casting one last glance in the rearview mirror. In the distance, I could see her, standing on the front lawn, her arms wrapped around herself, looking lost and small. She had no idea what to do next, or where to go. I knew she had nowhere to turn. Mark had already washed his hands of her, and now she was completely alone. The sight of her like that didn't evoke any pity in me. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of my carefully crafted revenge. As the city's skyline faded behind me, I reflected on everything that had led me to this point. There was no anger left, no bitterness. I felt oddly peaceful. The pain that had gnawed at me for months had disappeared, replaced by an overwhelming sense of freedom. The burden of betrayal no longer weighed me down. I had confronted it head-on, turned it into something powerful, and now it was behind me. The open road stretched out before me, endless and inviting, offering the promise of a new beginning. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, and I didn't care. What mattered was that I was leaving it all behind, leaving her behind. The future, whatever it held, was mine now. I felt the corners of my mouth tug upward into a smile. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe deeply, fully, without the suffocating weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. I thought about Anna, standing there alone in front of that house, confused and helpless. And I couldn't help but think that revenge, despite all its complexities, had never tasted so sweet.